Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our very own Mr. Richard Aching. He's the Manager of Technical Information in the Intellectual Property Office of Trinidad and Tobago, in the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs. Mr. Aching holds a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the University of the West Indies. He has previously worked in ornamental, horticulture, landscaping, and golf course construction industry, in addition to being a market analyst with a well-known market research firm. He's also worked as technical cooperation assistant at the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Aching joined the staff of the Intellectual Property Office of Trinidad and Tobago in 1999. His present responsibilities as manager of technical examination include, among others, performing substantive examination on patents, utility certificates, industrial designs, new plant varieties, and integrated circuits, as well as advising the controller on all technical issues relating to the grant of intellectual property rights. I now hand you over to Mr. Aching.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction, Gayatri, and thanks again, Tamara, for leading off with that teaser. I would say it's a teaser. Now people want to go and try out the tool and see, well, let's see what will happen if I plug it in. Spend maybe half an hour on IP and business. Why are we doing all of this tralala? Because you might be saying, I'm in business already. I've been in business for a long time, and I have not used any of these tools before, and I'm fine. I'm going fine, and I never heard the term before. And if you want to get into, I would say, if you ask me the question plainly, do I need this thing? Y'all keep talking all these great things about IP. Do I need it to be in business? Short answer is no, I don't. I do not need intellectual property rights to be in business or to start a business. Okay. What we're talking about here are intellectual property rights that you can exercise if you're already engaged in a venture. And just understand these rights are private rights. You don't have to get them. They're optional. You can choose to get them. And more importantly, we get asked this question all the time because people think, well, if I get these IPRs, I'll have a shield against my competitors. And people want to rip me off. Well, no, they're actually negative rights. So it's not the right to do something, but the right to prevent or to authorize use of your creations, your property, your registered property, without your permission, to prevent the use without your permission. That's what it is, simply. Okay, but we will also say, well, I didn't know I needed it before, and we say ignorance can be blissful, certainly, if you don't mind a few things. And we're going to be sharing these presentations with you, so you don't have to write down everything. So if you don't mind people taking credit for your work and reaping your rewards, fine. If you don't mind competitors jumping on your bandwagon and copying your stuff and deceiving your customers, if you're cool with that, or if you don't mind allowing poor quality competing products or counterfeits to drag down and ruin your good reputation and cover your brand in opprobrium, good word for Scrabble. Go and look it up. If you don't mind those things, fine. You can skip this presentation. Now, because I have a business and I'm okay, it doesn't mean that I'm achieving optimal profitability. And this is where we would like to seriously encourage you to consider exploring what IPRs I have or which IPRs I can develop or generate out of my business, and how can I use them tactically. Okay, so if you want to move beyond safe and to be competitive, then it'll depend. Some of it will depend on which part of the economy you're part of. So the old or new, and we talk about the old economy as the industrial economy, the physical goods, brick and mortar assets, as your only assets or finite natural resources like we have here in Trinidad and Tobago. The new economy is defined as the knowledge economy, where the focus is on information or know-how, innovation, creativity. And we say it is as finite as the number of human brains out there. That is the natural resource as far as the new economy is concerned, or the knowledge economy. So if you're a thinker and you can use your brain, well then there's something to be tapped there and something to be exercised. And I'm gonna put up this quote here from the late great Peter Drucker. He says the purpose of business is to create a customer, and the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results, and everything else you do are costs, right? So that is the function of business as far as Peter Drucker is concerned. And you see the things he focused on there? Marketing and innovation. The innovation part is your creative part. And sometimes you might need to drill down and see, well, what really am I selling? I'm in business, yes. And I think what I'm selling is my SKUs, my inventory. Maybe I'm a service provider. I sell goods and services. But then if you go further down into asking your clientele, why did they come to you in the first place? What attracted them to you? You start seeing that sometimes you might be selling other things, like the intellectual property or intellectual assets themselves, data, experiences, associations, image, self-worth, coolness, and other markers. And you realize as you move away from the brick and mortar assets, from the old economy, aspects of the new economy, you get into more intangible stuff. Things you can't put a number on sometimes, things that the bank can't put a number on, unfortunately, in some cases. But that is sometimes when you ask your clientele, why did they come to you, or what do they enjoy? Besides the first experience, the goods and services, there's also more to it. Okay. One of the things we like to dive into here is your branding, because branding, if I could take off from Peter Drucker, the marketing and innovation deal with two primary things: the creation of new things, and also the marketing will deal with your image, your branding, your trademarks. How do people know you or distinguish you from somebody else? But that's where your registered trademarks come in. You've probably been using a brand for some years. More than likely, if you haven't heard of the IP system before, it's probably an unregistered trademark. You may have had no trouble so far. Some of my clients said they only run into trouble and they came to us after they attempted to export and started to play in a bigger pool or bigger pond. And then it became more critical to have these things nailed down before you get too big or bigger. And always consider this: you're starting off small now. And every large venture you see out there started off somewhere small, and then it grew. Very few businesses start huge, they grew. And so you have to anticipate growth and expansion and where you're going to end up. So the things that you can do with your branding, convey your message, your marketing message, helps you to exclude competitors, and reputation. That's what gets attached to your brand, because when people speak about your brand, the first thing they experience is what they hear. The brand itself, the words, which can convey something. I'm just gonna put up some examples. You can tell stories and convey some values and be clever or cheeky in some cases. Some of you may know some of these stories. Some of the very young ones may have to be prompted that FedEx was once Federal Express, and something they got clever with the artwork here, and in between the E and the X is in the negative space is an arrow, which conveys motion because they move stuff. You've probably seen Amazon and wondering, what is this big smiley looking thing here? Well, it's a very cheeky subliminal reference to that we have everything from A to Z. Gillette, if you have noticed, is a very sharp line running from the G to the I, and it's also connote sharpness. Or could they sell razors? That's what that was their first venture. And if you're familiar with this brand from Sony called the Sony Vaio, their brand of laptops, it's written VAIO and represented by this graphic to represent two things that is again a geek joke. So geeks would appreciate, well, here's a sine wave, which represents an analog signal, and ones and zeros represent a digital signal. Again, these are very clever things that are embedded that some people will catch a joke. Not everybody, unfortunately, but they know who their markets are. And so you can actually be clever with your branding and your logos and your devices that go with your messaging and convey something as opposed to a plain old word. You can convey other messages with it. And I want us to consider too, as we have our export ambitions, even in the CARICOM region, we need to consider what is our brand going to mean somewhere else. You've probably gotten very comfortable in Trinidad and Tobago, and your brand works here. When it transits languages and cultures, you ought to make sure that it's going to convey the same value it did at home. And you should be doing some homework too if you have any export ambitions. So I put up some infamous examples of big companies who made some faux pas. So Clairol once upon a time launched a culinary called Mist Stick in Germany. And they forgot to check not just the translations, but the slang. Slang is where most of these brands got caught. In German, mist is slang for manure. Gubar, we might know. Colgate had a toothpaste called Q in France, but that was also the name of a French pornographic magazine, so they had to do about turn. What does my tagline translate into? Cause, bear, turn it loose. In literal Spanish, translates almost to something meaning diarrhea. And of course, we would now know that because of the meaning of the word sucks, that tagline, nothing sucks like an Electrolux, will have the opposite effect on your target audience. Oh, and Ford had a nice one there in Brazil. The Pinto, that's an old brand. They don't make a Pinto anymore. But in Portuguese, it means tiny male genitals. And we have some examples of brands that tried to come into Trinidad and didn't do so well, like this brand of vehicles from India called Tata. Anybody remembers that? Tata? And if you know your Trinidad slang good enough, you know that Tata is not a good thing to call anything that you want to sell, unless you're selling manure. I wanted to tantalize you with some stuff on patents, so how we protect inventions. Okay, IBM used to earn about $1 billion a year in patent royalties, $1 billion US patent royalties. Royalties are what people get for letting other people use their patents when they license their patents to others. So long ago, we used to speak about IBM compatible PCs. And that meant that IBM owned the rights in the platforms, and everybody had a license from them. And that is how they earned a lot of money just from straight royalties. As the time had gone on, obviously some of the patents would have expired, but they're still making a fair amount of money in the mainframe industry. Just to tantalize you, there's a lot of focus on pharmaceutical companies now. I imagine in about 5 years' time, we'll be looking back to see, well, how much money did these pharma companies make from selling COVID-19 vaccines? Looking back, we saw that Pfizer's drug Lipitor, which is to treat high cholesterol, over the lifetime of that patent, they earned $128 billion, which is, just to put it in perspective, probably 6 times what they earned from Viagra. Yes. Your heart is more important than erectile dysfunction, probably. So these are things that they were able to leverage from owning the rights to a particular technology. I have one more to share with you. You don't have to read this thing all the way through. Essentially, it's the string of patents dealing with the pull rings on soft drink cans. And I want you to focus on the last line. Coca-Cola used to pay the inventor £140,000 per day while that patent was valid. Consider that patents can last up to 20 years or 14 years in the old days. Do some maths. That's not a small amount of money in royalties. And this is not only the companies, these are just persons who came up with a solution that somebody else thought was useful and was willing to pay. The intrinsic royalty was 1/10 of a penny per can, but in a mass production system, it adds up. So don't get greedy. Please look at your failures and don't think that, well, because the thing I wanted to build didn't work out, it's useless. We know the story of Post-it notes. Technically, the adhesive that they started developing, that Spencer Silver started developing, failed. It didn't set, it didn't get hard or dry. It stayed tacky. Another colleague, Arthur Fry, was actually looking for something to keep his bookmarkers in his songbook because he was part of a choir. And he just wished this bookmarker didn't just drop out of the book every time he opened it. And he put a dab of the failed adhesive in and realized, hey, it stayed tacky without leaving too much residue on the paper. Ta-da! Somebody pivoted all that to turn that failure into a very successful product. And in fact, it created a category of products, which we call sticky notes or Post-it notes. I wanted also to look at the very famous Gatorade. Again, none of these ventures start off thinking that we are going to be blockbusters. They start off, let's just find a solution to the problem we think we have here. And the good old Gatorade was created to help in the days when hydration after strenuous activity was uncommon knowledge. Back when they thought that, well, when you're on the field, you should not drink water because you'll get stomach cramps. The team led by Dr. Cade thought otherwise. He theorized, well, maybe if I replace what they're losing in terms of fluids and electrolytes and add some sugar, maybe I can restore some performance. And that is the basis of what is now that juggernaut called Gatorade. You have to consider too that just because I invent something, everybody else will think it's great too. Marketing also exists when you're considering your creations. That's why this focus on marketing and innovation. So somebody invented, I shouldn't say somebody, two women, just in case you people think that a sure man invented that. Two women invented three-legged pantyhose once upon a time, and they got a patent on it way back. And how it works is that you have one leg folded up, and if you get a run in your stocking, you just nip off to the bathroom and unfurl the other leg, step into it, tuck back in the torn one or the one with the run, and you're back in business. Needless to say, I doubt you could find any of these in the market today because people didn't consider how women's clothing fit, and when they realized that there's no tidy way to fold up that extra leg without it bulging in a bad way somewhere. Simple as that. Invention, got a patent, can't sell any. Net result, no money. In fact, you have a loss that you're looking at. You also have to consider, just because I'm clever at home, doesn't mean that everybody wants my clever invention. This is something called a washlet. It's a paperless toilet. Very clever. Very popular in Japan. There's 60% of installations in Japan have one of these. That's to tell you how popular it is. If you travel to Japan, brace yourself. You might bounce up one of these. So have your translator handy so you can read the buttons quick, because there's no paper inside of there. When you finish your business, you press rinse. The wand extends on it and finds where to aim and gives you a little rinse in with warm water, hopefully. When you had enough rinsing, you press dry cycle and it blows warm air on you until you're dried off. Ta-da! Just don't get up before the rinse cycle completes. Now, very popular in Japan, and I can hear the snickers right now. Would you buy one for your home? I'll try it. I will try it. But I'm one of those people who will try anything new. Not most people. So it may not have that much appeal outside of certain cultures. Another thing to consider, it's not using the patent system in the first place. And perhaps you can keep your invention a secret. But the thing is that only works better if you have a recipe-based thing. If you have a physical object, or let's say even that paperless toilet, somebody can actually take it apart because it's physical and reverse engineer it. They can see how it works and build and produce copies of it. Trade secrets work best with recipe-based innovations that can't be reverse engineered. Preferably recipes with multiple ingredients and different process steps. So it's hard to figure out what comes first. And if anybody's done any cooking, they know that the sequence is important. The difference between adding wet ingredients to dry ingredients and vice versa is the difference between getting biscuits and getting cake if you're a baker. And the biggest part of this is having to manage employee access, or who has access to the secret knowledge, and how do you look after those who have the access. So the well-known story of good old Angostura, they have protocols that apply to the staff who have access to the secrets. There's some protocols on how they can move together, travel together, or they're not allowed to be in the same place, playing together or something like that, because you don't want to avoid risking losing them at any given time, all of them, because that's where the business is built on, that secret. And that pretty much applies to not just big companies that are big now, like Coca-Cola and KFC, but even the little Gorilla Hut by the corner. They have the same challenges with their secret sources. I'm just going to skip through some of these. I had a list of, you can read it at your leisure. What sort of royalties, some of the biggest songs, and these are just your royalties, not the sales of the actual records and CDs, but the royalties that went back to the composers. And some songs you might know, some that are very old, the Christmas song, Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman, Every Breath You Take by the Police. Well, Sting is the sole receiver of the royalty there. The Santa Claus song, Stand By Me. And at the top of the list is the Happy Birthday song, and then White Christmas. So we're just shifting gears here to copyright and related rights now, as other revenue streams from your creations that you create. Copyright and related rights cover literary and artistic works. So if that is, or software even, so if that is where you are creating literary and artistic works, there is a system for the monetization of those creations that you should look into, and not just leave them begging. You need to ask, what are they worth? What sort of rights do I have attached to these things? I'm going to give you a big one here. If you follow the fortunes of Michael Jackson, I hope you appreciate that he was not just, besides a talented guy, he was also a very shrewd businessman. And once upon a time, he bought the entire Beatles collection, plus Bob Dylan's collection, the repertoire, for $47 million stake, once upon a time in '85. Later, his estate, after his passing, they sold his stake in that holding company to clear his debts for $750 million. That's what that collection is worth. Beatles, Bob Dylan, and some others. But the biggest prize inside of it was the Beatles collection. Understand, these things can be, these rights last for the life of the author and up to 50 years after his death, or 70 years in some cases. So understand, these rights can be willed to your estate. Something to consider. Also, just remember as we wind this down, just remember these rights are territorial, so you don't just get them just like that, unless it's copyright and related rights. In that case, copyright and related rights are automatic in many countries, but not the industrial property rights like patents and trademarks and designs. We haven't had a chance, we don't have time to get into all of them. You should be pragmatic when you're looking abroad. Look for your major markets, or centers of excellence, or places that might pose a manufacturing threat to what you're making. Understand that these rights are not mutually exclusive. One item can have multiple forms of IPRs. Consider you don't want to be naive. That's why you should always get counsel in how you, when you're negotiating and licensing and drawing up agreements. And hopefully your counsel are experienced and familiar with some tactics. Understand that a patent is not the be all and end all, because you can find your way around the patent if you improve the technology and shift the demand to a newer technology. That way the old technology is now passé or moot. You have to look for markets that are worth protecting. Not every single market is worth protecting. You have to consider market size. When we say reserve rights, things like copyright consists of 9 or 10 different rights depending on what you have. You don't have to give one person all. You can reserve some rights. You can license some to one, some to the other. You have some flexibility there. Note these things all have different durations. You can contact the office if you want to get some more information on that. Trademarks essentially last 10 years, but they're renewable indefinitely. So good old Angostura is about 170 something years old, that brand. Okay, so understand that the company and the brand that you create now may very well outlive you and be something that your grandkids or your whoever you pass the business on to can still be trading that good brand that you created. Don't get anxious or greedy with royalties. If you remember the royalty for the Coca-Cola pull rings, and consider leaving trade secrets off the table and reserve that for later consultancy. All right. There's more ways to squeeze some money out of this thing. So I just want to encourage you to take a closer look at what you have. Talk to us and tell us what you have, because you might know what to call what you have, because we certainly have not dealt with all of them here in the short time we have. There's a whole bunch of other things like plant varieties and geographic indications and industrial designs that integrated circuits we haven't spoken about yet. But these things exist. And it depends on what your business is in right now or what you plan to innovate in or create later. So just want to thank you folks for your attention, and I invite any questions.